So I'm going to tell you my story, but first I actually feel the need to address and talk about this dress that I'm wearing, because this is like a Mexican kimono, we call it. I love the colors, I love the flowers, and it has this strange sleeve, like a hole for hugging or something, I don't know. Last time I only wore this dress once before today, and that was on the day of my wedding. So you know, I was actually married for 4 years, and 3 of them I thought I was happy, and the last year it all terribly fell apart. Strangely enough, if I think about it now, at first I can't even remember why I got married in the first place. I do remember when I would tell my German friends, oh, I'm getting married, they'd be like, why? And I thought, for love, out of love, of course. And now I can't even really remember why exactly I fell in love and what it was. And after some thinking, I remember, oh, yeah, he was handsome, and yeah, maybe he was kind of nice and kind and gentle. I found him strong and confident, and he would say hi to every cat in the street, and he would talk Spanish to me. I thought it was hot. So we had a lot in common, and we grew kind of close. But anyway, all these things, they come to my mind only later after some thinking, because at first, the first thing that comes to mind when I think about my husband is his eyes when he just yells at me. That was his thing. My husband would get angry, and in those moments he would burst in my face with his yelling and contempt. Out of nowhere, in any context, he would yell. He yelled in the bathroom, in the bedroom, on the train, at the airport, in the street, at a work meeting. He'd get this furious look, he'd point fingers and say really harsh things. He yelled because I was late, because I took the wrong turn, because I said something wrong, or I put on a see-through dress or lipstick, or I didn't make enough dinner. And before the yelling, there was also always this moment of sulking. And that's when he would give me the cold shoulder and let that anger brew inside him till it got all sour like fermented cabbage and bitter like an old man's tongue. And at times this sulking went on for weeks, until he finally let it out, and he'd be yelling and mocking and swearing and patronizing and nearly blowing up from his own righteousness. We call it having a fight, actually, when he poured all out on me. I was always completely taken aback. It was always like thunder out of the blue sky. It's really hard and petrifying to see your loved one burst in sacred anger in your face all of a sudden, and I was really defenseless against that. I'd say, sorry, but I didn't mean to, but he cut me off, and he'd say, don't interrupt, let me finish. So I'd listen, I'd hear his point, I'd try and understand. I was looking for higher ground. I'd think that there is grace in forgiveness and greatness in giving and wisdom in listening. So while he ranted, sulked, and yelled, I would give him all the time in the world. And then I'd say something like, I'm so sorry, it was all my fault. I was all apologies, but honestly, I was usually just saying whatever it would take to make the fight stop. It usually stopped eventually, after I got to the point of taking all the blame, maybe crying a little, maybe a lot. Then he'd soften up, make me tea, look at me with those puppy eyes, and touch me gently. You know, is this abuse? I wrote in my diary after one of those fights. I still loved him dearly at that time, so that question was left unanswered. And after all, he wasn't even doing anything that terrible, you know, he simply had a temper. It was a choleric character. He was getting angry on occasion and acting it out. I thought I could live with that. And I just never wanted to fight. I could never out-yell him, and besides, fighting back was like pouring gasoline on fire. It was easier for me to take the blame and find the fault in myself and promise to get better. I thought those were the things we do for love. Maybe it's one of those things women learn in my culture, to be selfless, nothing short but perfect, to make parents proud, to have it under control. Don't show off, don't say whatever comes to mind, take responsibility, take no pride. If he's angry, it's for a reason. You must improve, you can be a better wife. It's like you must always bake some incredible, unforgettable cakes but never get to try a slice. Or you're making up games and toys you can never play. Or you must be really, really beautiful, but you never enjoy your own body and your own beauty because you're too busy trying to please the other. However, this whole approach was wearing me out. A sense of dull guilt and shame became part of my daily life. And even in peaceful times, I felt I was becoming smaller, I was surrendering my space, and it all happens really subtly. You almost don't feel the pain. Just out of these small moments. Well, of course, not a problem, honey. I will switch off the music. Sure, darling. I will do as you say. Sí, mi amor, vamos a Mexico. And saying things like that seemed effortless, like a bird shedding a feather. But every little bit that I surrendered left me a little bit naked, a little bit breached, a little bit violated. The relationship started to feel like an exam, like a rusty cage, limiting me and numbing me. After every fight, I felt like there were blisters on my soul. Stuck, I felt like I couldn't grow. And when you stop growing, you start dying. I tried to talk to my husband about it, of course. I'd use all my communication skills the best that I could. I'd say, I feel this and that when you do such and such. But he'd say, it's all in your head. I really hate that phrase because that's what my dad used to tell me in the Russian language. And it certainly wasn't all in my head. It was in my body too. And there were all these little signs, which I ignored because there was still this love. There were still these vows that we said. We had promised. I had promised to hear him out, to consider him. I looked at him with my love eyes and I saw a man who didn't mean to hurt me, didn't mean to be mean, a man who couldn't help his strong feelings. And I hoped maybe he could change his ways. So one of the winters we spent together in Mexico, in Oaxaca, and that time I was learning Spanish and doing other things, and he was doing his research, but actually all we did that winter was just fight. I remember waking up after one of them. I'd cried my eyes out during the night, so the next morning my head was heavy, thoughts were like thick, warm, milky fog. I felt nauseated and weak and so thin inside, I felt almost transparent. I remember him taking me out for breakfast and me just sleeping and stumbling on every step, not eating my food. I didn't want anything. I was just relieved the fighting was over. But also there was something else. There was something inside my bones, deep inside, saying that it can't go on like this. A couple of fights later, I actually lost my original wedding ring somewhere in the streets of Oaxaca. And how do you not believe in signs after that? But actually, there was another thing happening in Oaxaca that winter besides the fighting. That land in general was buzzing with energy, colors, and music and stories. And I read one Mexican story that really stuck with me. It was about this woman who collected the bones of dead animals, and she would put them together, make skeletons, and then she would sing for them, and she would sing life into them, and they would run away free. And bones actually are the most enduring part of ourselves. When everything else withers and seems to be forgotten, bones might still linger for millions of years. I couldn't stop thinking about my bones. I wondered if there was still a part of me that wasn't burdened by the guilt and the fear, if there was still some fire, still some lust to live and enjoy, if I still had a voice to speak for myself. I asked myself, what do I want to do? What would I do actually if I didn't have to waste my energy on avoiding fights and trying to please this angry man? He's calling the shots, but what about me? Where is my body? What does it need? What's in my heart and why does it feel so broken? And how do I feel whole again? It really felt like gathering myself back, bone by bone by bone. I began feeling and satisfying my little needs, collecting little joys, little victories, little moments of being in power. Brief moments of not feeling thin, weak, and empty. Brief moments of not allowing myself to feel guilt for taking a loud breath or walking too quickly. No more shame for who I am. And then something changed. My husband began to annoy me really badly. I started to pay less attention to him and more attention to me, and I noticed I was being stressed when he was around and relieved when he wasn't. I still struggled with this choice between honoring the vow that I had given some years back on the one hand, and on the other hand, honoring the wisdom deep inside me, the wisdom deep in my bones that screamed, things aren't right the way they are. And finally, after some while, came the anger. There was another fight in public, right in the streets of Freiburg. We were meeting downtown. I saw him sitting on one of those steps in front of the theater with his black jacket, black beard, black sunglasses. As soon as I saw him, I felt his anger and contempt. We walked towards Rathaus, and I remember suddenly this electric charge coming from him into me. Or it wasn't from deep inside of me, I couldn't tell. This incredible, almost unbearable energy. It was a powerful feeling, like fire in my veins, like an alarm screaming, he can't treat me this way, I'm not taking any more of that. So that time I yelled back. That anger felt like an avalanche rolling down, like a levee breaking down. And that old idea of love, when I had to tiptoe around someone else's fickle temper and please someone, that old idea was washed away by a mighty wave of rage, pure anger from the core. And I finally saw him at that moment as he really was, just a guy who couldn't handle his feelings, just an angry man who couldn't contain it and put it out on his wife. The final breakup still took some time. I had many more occasions to defend myself. I really learned to walk away, to speak up, hang up, move away, move out. It was messy, exhausting, expensive, and so good. It felt so empowering. I wouldn't trade the experience for anything else. I finally felt free from all the shame and guilt. I was relaxed and at ease for the first time in years. Bone by bone, I had gathered myself back and began singing back the joy into life. I used my anger to burn guilt and shame in a hot spice pan. I changed the way I think about love too. It is no longer an exam for me, no longer an attempt to please someone. Love for me now is generous, it doesn't need your sacrifice. Love is attention, compassion, hearing the other and seeing them in the truth of who they really are. You can only give such attention to others when you have given it to yourself first. Love knows no fear, it nourishes you. It's like summer rain to thirsty soil. I found it in my bones, I spilled it all over my being, and I watched it grow even more. Now I've fallen in love like that, once again, and for the first time actually. I have all the cake that I want. I wear whatever I like, I hear no yelling, I take no blame, and I have the right to tell my story.